First tonight, a
Prime Crime Network
exclusive.
A lot of mystery here surrounding the deaths of 3 teenagers in Florida over a span of about 3 days, and it does appear they could be connected, but we are working to gather the latest information. CB Cotton with Fox News is following this story and joins us live here. CB, what sparked this case?
Well, Josh, thanks so much for having me. First, I want to add right off the top that this morning, the sheriff of Marion County, where all this occurred, he came on Fox News and he said, he was asked rather, whether or not an arrest is imminent in this case, and the sheriff replied yes. So that's some good news in these tragic circumstances. But this all started some 60 miles northwest of Orlando with a gruesome discovery of a 16-year-old girl who had been shot and essentially left to die on the side of the road. When officers found this young girl's body, she was immediately taken to the hospital, where sadly she died earlier this week. We're learning more about who this young girl was. Friends identified her as Layla Silvernail. This information from a GoFundMe page. On that page, she's described as the definition of a team player and an amazing athlete. And of course, being that she was only 16 years old, we know she was on the cusp of adulthood. These are just heartbreaking circumstances that we're learning more about.
And we do know that some other teens were found. Was it with gunshot wounds?
Josh, that's correct. And we may have a map that we can pull up and show our viewers right now. I want to walk us through this because this is kind of complex, the way these teens were discovered. Last Thursday night, officers say Layla was shot and left near a dumpster on a rural county road. And then on Friday morning, a 17-year-old teen boy was found dead with a gunshot wound less than a mile away from where Layla was found. And then some 9 miles away, officers were looking for Layla's car. They found it submerged inside a lake. The shocking discovery inside the car, a third victim, a teen girl who had been shot and killed. So obviously, just very heartbreaking to learn these details. 3 young lives taken.
And so one of the big questions, of course, is do we know if these victims actually knew each other, if they were acquainted?
Josh, the sheriff says the victims were friends and that they were together before they died. Right now, he's pointing the finger at wannabe gang activity. That's his exact phrase, wannabe gang activity. And he's saying this may have played a role, and we pressed the sheriff on what this means. And he basically explained this is a term he likes to use, some of his officers like to use, and it describes a gang structure that isn't very defined. It lacks the hierarchy that you see within the ranks of established gang groups. And sadly, the rumor mill has been working really diligently in this case. The sheriff has even taken to social media to try to dispel some of those rumors. Right now, he's saying there is no evidence of a serial killer or killers. He also says right now there's no evidence to indicate that, let me correct myself. He says right now their evidence indicates that all the teens, again, were together before they died, and that they likely were all shot around the same time, and their bodies were taken to different places. So that's what we're hearing right now from the sheriff.
All right. Do we know at this point, I mean, you kind of said that the sheriff sounds like he's saying that an arrest is imminent, so to speak. So do we know how this case is playing out with investigators right now? How many detectives are working this case, what they're doing?
Well, right now the sheriff says that their evidence is leading them to believe that multiple suspects are involved. Yesterday, we did do a one-on-one interview with the sheriff, and I asked him whether or not drugs played a role in this case, and he said he couldn't comment. So that's another tidbit that I want to add into our conversation. But right now, he says it looks like multiple suspects are involved, and they're putting a lot of manpower towards this case. We know 15 detectives are assigned, and the sheriff says those detectives are combing through digital and forensic evidence. Another thing he added yesterday in our conversation is that, sometimes it takes a bit for them to comb through some of this evidence, particularly digital evidence, whether that is phones or other electronics. He didn't elaborate on, but we do know from other criminal cases that if they are having to look through some of that digital evidence, maybe it's phones, it can take some time to get permissions and access and things like that. So more to come as we continue to
simple terms, there is no honor among thieves. And at some point, these three individuals turned on our three victims and murdered them.
Breaking at noon, 3 young people now accused of shooting and killing 3 teens, 2 of them arrested. The third suspect is still out there.
The sheriff says the 2 arrested suspects confessed to shooting the third victim. And this major break in the case comes about a week after the first victim was found shot in the area of Forest Lake Park. The 2 other victims were found in the same general area last Friday and Saturday. News 6's Mark Blayman is in Marion County with the newest details on the investigation and arrests.
The Marion County Sheriff telling us his department was under an enormous amount of pressure to track down those responsible for last week's triple homicide. The work by detectives resulting in the arrest of 2 young suspects with another on the run.
We are shocked not only are the victims juveniles, but the murderers are juveniles as well.
Sheriff Billy Woods announcing who investigators say carried out the murders of 3 teens near Ocklawaha last week. Deputies arresting 12-year-old Christopher Atkins and 17-year-old Robert Robinson. 16-year-old Taj Bruton is still at large.
The investigators were able to determine that this group of juveniles were involved in committing burglaries and robberies, which they were referred to as a lick.
Deputies say the suspects and 3 victims knew each other and were all associated with a gang. Woods tells us the group was committing burglaries when the suspects turned on the victims.
Basically, simple terms, there is no honor among thieves.
According to detectives, 2 16-year-old girls and a 17-year-old boy were all fatally shot March 30th. Their bodies found at different locations over the next couple days, including one victim found in the trunk of a submerged vehicle. After several tips from the community, investigators say they were able to identify the suspects, who now face charges of first-degree murder.
They took a life without thought. They deserve the full extent of the law.
Woods says the state attorney is reviewing the cases against the 2 suspects and will later make a decision on trying them as adults. Meanwhile, the search continues for that third suspect. Anyone with details on his whereabouts is urged to call law enforcement.
Exclusive.